hospitalization, it's 8 hours a day. So for us, we kind of think about it in terms of meals and snacks. So it's 2 supported meals a day and potentially a snack. So we have to stretch out our partial hospitalization. You might go to another partial hospitalization program for depression that's only 6 hours a day because they don't have to think about the meals and snacks component.
Gotcha.
Or that medical component, but we have to think about that with eating disorders. And for us, we do 2 psychotherapy sessions, 1 registered dietitian session, 2 meals and snacks a day, multiple therapy groups, family systems, to make sure we're addressing all those environmental factors that play into the eating disorder, and a psychiatry and internist session every week. So
I know what I'm about to ask is impossible to answer because the answer is always, it depends. But what can somebody expect if they come in and get admitted to the PHP, partial hospitalization program? How long will that sustain before they see a step down?
Good question. It depends. No, I'm just kidding.
Smart Alec.
So I think if we had to kind of average it out, it would typically be somewhere between 30 and 45 days. And
that's a long time.
Yeah, it's a commitment.
Wow.
Recovery is a really serious commitment when you're struggling. Now, remember, not everybody has to go to that level of care. Some people are just fine and are able to really move in the direction they want to go when they're in just regular old outpatient, seeing a dietitian and a therapist and a psychiatrist. But with PHP, the severity of the eating disorder has to be matched with the strength of treatment. So the strength of treatment has to be greater than the strength of the eating disorder. So if you need PHP treatment, you have a pretty significant struggle with an eating disorder. So that's why the time takes so long. And now also we don't have residential treatment here in Reno.
Right.
So, well, that's not true. Reno Behavioral Health is trying to do a PHP program. Our RTC program, but for a little while there, we didn't have it, and it's sometimes people that are a little bit more significantly struggling end up in PHP for many reasons. One of them is because of access to care. One of them is because insurance doesn't want to pay for that level of care and they can't really afford that level of care through private pay, to kind of give a nod to our previous discussion about that stratification. And I think, it's hard. It's hard to break behavior patterns, and it takes a long time. It's a long game.
Yeah, I frequently say you didn't get here overnight, and it's not going to get undone overnight.
That's exactly right.
But the hope is that it lies in the fact that it's a little bit like wandering off your path. You were going to go walk to the lake, and you ended up in the middle of the forest. And when you're in the middle of the forest, you realize, holy cow, I'm off the trail. And you don't know where you are. You just know you're not at the lake. And you may have wandered many miles into the forest once you get a map and a compass, or these days a GPS unit, and you look down and you go, I'm 20 miles off the path. But with adequate counseling and feedback and support, the path back to the lake is only 4 miles. You don't have to walk back the entire 20 and restart the journey. And that's the benefit of self-awareness, is that it accelerates your path to recovery. So hold hope, those of you who are struggling and think that you've wandered many miles off of what your path is supposed to be. With some feedback and some guidance, the road is not going to be swift, but it will be swifter than the path that got you there.
Yes, for sure.
Do you want to bang on the politics a little bit and talk about insurance reimbursements, or is that...
We can.
Yeah.
We can.
Because we, there's the gap between like the self-pay and then the indigent, government funded. There's something called managed care or, HMO organizations that step in, commercial insurance, but they're a struggle too. Yeah. And why is that? Because this is literally life or death. Yeah, it seems like a no-brainer to get approval for a program, but... Yeah.
It's really cool that Amy is actually our peanut gallery today, because Amy does fight those battles for us with insurance companies. So if we have somebody that's in treatment at our PHP level of care, partial hospitalization, then she's having to call sometimes as frequently as every 3 days to justify to the insurance company why they continuously need that level of care. Now, there's advantages of that, as far as it's making sure that our treatment
holds
stays
you accountable.
Yeah, it holds us accountable. That's really good. It makes sure our documentation is in place. But there's also disadvantages to that. So if you have an insurance company that doesn't understand or know or specialize in eating disorders, then you're getting Joe Schmo on the other end of the line who doesn't. Poor Joe.
Father of Johnny and Susie.
Yes. We just don't know. They don't know what they're doing. And so a lot of times it takes getting denied and resources on our end. So let's say Amy is fighting this battle for our client who's in PHP. She gets denied by Joe, who's at the insurance company, telling us whether we get to have more authorized treatment days. And then we take it peer to peer. So that means now I have to get on the phone with a physician who may or may not be familiar with eating disorders and justify to him. And then if that doesn't happen, then they have to have the whole chart, review the whole chart by a third party. Meanwhile, this client's been in treatment for an additional 5 days.
Yeah.
And
off your dime.
Off our dime. Yeah. So it's complicated, it's complex, and it creates a lot of disparity.
You and I both own businesses that do the same thing, and we both battle this insurance problem, and we have disclaimers. I'm assuming you have one. We have one that says it's not our job to know what your insurance benefits are. And it sounds a little cold and calloused, but at the end of the day, it's not. And it requires a great investment of resources to find out. What you do with Amy and what we do with Lauren at Zephyr, for example, is it's a service. It's out of your and my pockets. We are the business owners, and we take literally our money and put it into someone else's paycheck on behalf of the client, because it would be highly unfair for that client who's receiving treatment to go and get on the phone with the insurance company, him or herself. That's really, really unfair. So what we're doing is we're offering this service, and I want to make everybody who's listening very, very aware of this. So when you go to the hospital and something gets denied for your MRI or your tooth extraction or whatever it may be, tooth extractions are cheap. I don't know why I picked that one, but the insurance company denies it, and your hospital administrative staff or your dental care professionals pick up the phone and call your insurance company on your behalf. Thank them.
Yes.
Because it is not their job. It is your job. But people, just walking the earth with their insurance coverage don't know this stuff. And it's really easy to slip into the whole, insurance companies are big, bad, faceless entities at which we throw eggs and they're sinister. But it's really not. It's about accountability. We all want to, feed our families at the end of the day, but we also want to help humanity, and the insurance companies want to make sure they're not getting defrauded. And so that's why these processes are in place. They're good and helpful, but sometimes they can be a pain, and that doesn't even take into account the insurance companies that don't fund those types of programs, right? And you run into that sometimes. They just partial hospitalization for eating disorders is not part of the benefit package.
Yes, I think that part is really difficult, is that sometimes, particularly with self-funded plans, they will have little clauses in there like, oh, well, this person doesn't have a dietetics benefit. And I get it. Like when you're sitting and you don't know about eating disorders, when you're sitting as the person with, let's make up Susie and Joe Schmo's little organization over here, when they're negotiating with the insurance company what they're going to provide for their employees, they don't have eating disorders on their mind. And so it feels really easy to throw out something like dietetics, like, oh yeah, we don't need to cover that for our employees, or we'll just cover these few things for our employees. But then when that hits the ground and what that actually looks like in practice is somebody with an eating disorder that is now potentially at risk, let's make something up, for refeeding syndrome, which is a really lethal condition that you can develop as you're gaining weight with an eating disorder if you've been anorexic, because they don't have somebody dietetically to manage that's familiar with the formulaic pieces of how to make sure somebody doesn't develop that.
What is refeeding syndrome?
Refeeding syndrome is a sudden severe electrolyte imbalance that happens when you've been starving yourself for a really long period of time and then you reintroduce food. People that struggle with anorexia or are severely underweight are at risk for it. So in other words, if you've been taking in about 200 calories a day and then all of a sudden you're taking in 1,500 calories a day, you could potentially be at really significant significant risk no matter what your body weight is.
What's it do? Because it sounds like, your electrolyte imbalances, drink some Gatorade.
Yes. So electrolytes definitely regulate the rhythm of our heart. So it can suddenly stop your heart at any point.
Yeesh.
Yes. The other risk is low blood glucose and slipping into a coma because of that.
Wow.
Yeah. So anyway, there's a lot of things that are very, very nuanced with eating disorders, and insurance companies don't always understand that.
And to put a bow on it, I don't think clinicians do either, which is why I'm glad we're doing this, because we do have some junior clinicians and some active clinicians listen to the podcast. And eating disorders is one of those scopes of competence that we talk about, scopes of practice, where you're allowed to do everything under the law, but should you? You want to get adequate training and experience. You really want to know where your boundaries are so that we can make proper referrals to a place like yours who can wrap them around in services. And we don't just go freelancing it in our offices without the dietitian, without the endocrinologist if necessary, without the physician, and without a really good substantive knowledge of the risks of what I could be doing as I'm talking to this person about trauma recovery. And by the way, hey, have you eaten today? That's not the appropriate approach. So, clinicians,
have you barfed today?
Yeah, have you barfed? Have you Ralphed today? How Ralph much have you done? How barfing are you? No, I kid. But seriously, take it seriously. I always struggle to wrap up because it sounds like I'm asking somebody to go to the gallows. Any last words? But we want to give a plug for you for sure. ThriveWellnessReno.com. You did just open a new location. You moved, correct?
We are moving. We're in process.
Okay.
Correct. Yeah.
When's that going to be complete?
491 Court Street will be our new eating disorders treatment program location. So we're really separating that out from our other location.
Oh, you're keeping it. You're not moving the whole thing?
For a while.
Okay.
Yeah, for a while.
Wow.
We'll see how it looks. We may move the whole operation at some point, but for a while we're going to just separate programs and see how that goes.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And that's a big, pretty house, if I recall correctly, right?
I'm very excited about it. It's 112 years old, which it translates into really poor insulation and asbestos and all those really fun things for property owners, but it's gorgeous and wonderful, and it feels like a very nurturing environment, and it's a home environment. So I think that has a lot of therapeutic value.
Does it back onto the Truckee River?
Yes.
Awesome.
And the park.
I'm taking a tour.
I know.
I don't know when, but it'll happen.
So the park, what is the park downtown? No, not Idlewild.
Barbara Bennett?
It's the one where they have art. Yes, Wingfield.
Yes.
It backs up to Wingfield, and it's got those tennis courts right behind it, and it's really cool.
That is super cool. I can't thank you enough for coming on. I always like when people provide content for this show.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
Yeah, and we try to keep it broad ranging and still tied to mental health. We're proudly, truly international, not just because we're on the interwebs, but because we've spanned many countries. And this is, mental health knows no jurisdiction. It knows no political borders, and certainly eating disorders don't either. And so, if we're reaching different countries and you have maybe inquiries about how people can get help, we're very obviously Nevada-centric and U.S.-centric. Do you know any international organizations, or is there one in the U.S. that can maybe link to others? Because we do all have the interwebs.
So, great question. I like, if you're international, accessing IADAP, as I mentioned before, the International Association of Eating Disorder Treatment Professionals, and looking to see if there is a certified eating disorder specialist in your area is always a good idea. Also, accessing NEDA, National, I know that's country specific, but National Eating Disorders Association. So looking and seeing if they have resources for out of the country would be a good idea as well.
That's awesome. Thank you very much for joining Kat Geiger from Thrive Wellness and Peanut Gallery Amy. On behalf of the Zephyr Wellness family and the Noggin Notes team, we all thank you for listening and wish you great mental wellness. Bye-bye.